Hi, everybody. Getting ready to start our next lecture as we continue to move forward through the semester. And just a couple of things that I would like to kind of clean up, some housekeeping items before we get into that information. The first thing is, since the last time I posted a video lecture, one of the biggest changes that has happened is that the school did communicate that we are going to remain online for the remainder of the semester. And like I said, at the point that I made the last video lecture, that determination had not been made at that particular time. And so I didn't bring that up because I didn't want to throw it out there if that's not the way things went. But since that time, it has been determined that we are going to stay online. We are not going to come back together for face-to-face meetings. So I just want to put that out there. I am sure that the college communicated that with you guys, but just in case you're getting a second communication from me that this is how the rest of the semester is going to go. Not what we anticipated when we started the semester. I know that nobody thought that this is how we were going to have to work through things, but it is what it is, and we are going to make the best possible situation out of it that we can. Nothing has changed in the fact that this information, anatomy, physiology, is very near and dear to my heart, and I want you guys to continue to get the information that you need as we move through this. But it does change things because we don't have those face-to-face meetings. We don't have as many lab opportunities. There are some things that we can do online, but it changes the dynamic. And like I said, with not having those face-to-face meetings, I know that that kind of changes the number of points and things like that that are going to happen throughout the rest of the semester. So some things that I want to communicate to you guys just to make sure that we're all on the same page and that you guys are in a good place as we move forward. This is not going to become a situation where you are going to be at a disadvantage. And I mean that in the regards of your grades. And I know some of you are concerned with your grades. They might not be where you want them to be. And I'm going to reassure you that that is all going to be taken into consideration on my end, that this is completely different from what we anticipated at the beginning of the semester. And I'm going to adapt to that. I'm going to make some changes so that this becomes a situation where you can continue to be successful. You can see the results that you want to see. And so that is something that we're having to change. And change is something that we are becoming very familiar with because with this virus, things are changing on a day-to-day basis, an hour-by-hour basis. And I understand that with all of that, I'm going to need to change some things too. And I'm very willing to do that. But like I said, not knowing last time we met exactly where the school was going to go with this, I needed to have that information to be able to understand where I was going to go with things and what I needed to do with things. So I'm at that point. I know what the rest of the semester looks like now, and I am going to start to bring in those changes. But I need you guys to be reassured that this is still all about you, and you are going to continue to get the things that you need and be successful. And I'm going to make all the considerations that I need to in order for that to happen. Not giving grades away by any means, but I just want you guys to understand that I realize how unique the situation is and that this is still all about you guys and making sure that you get the best possible education from every avenue that you can. So please rest assured in that. I am going to be as available as I can for questions. I've had people emailing me late at night, early in the morning, and I have been doing my best to respond to those as quickly as I possibly can. I know there's nothing worse to sitting down to try and do an assignment and all of a sudden you run into a question. And if we're sitting in the classroom, you can ask me, I can answer it, and you're right back on track. Where in this setting, if you have to stop and wait an hour, 2 hours, whatever for an answer, kind of throws a wrench into things. So trying to take care of all of those things as much in a timely manner as I possibly can, but continue to relay those questions to me. And we are going to work through this. And at the end of it, it's still going to be a win-win situation for you guys, as well as for me feeling like this was a successful semester in getting through and covering the information that we need it to. All right, that aside, we are going to move forward with our information for this particular week, and we are transitioning out of the excretory system into the lymphatic system. And a lot of people would refer to the lymphatic system as their immunity, and you can use those two terms in place of each other, and that will be just fine. When we look at the lymphatic system, though, there are some components to it that a lot of people don't realize that happen within the lymphatic system. And so we're going to talk through all of those things as we move through this particular chapter. So looking at the first slide, and I am going to post this PowerPoint with everything going on lockdown. I know that I gave you guys all the packets the last time we met. Some people were not there that evening, and I left those at the college thinking that was the best place so that the next time we met, I could get those to those people that didn't have them. And so I'm going to post the packet again in Blackboard. If you have lost them, left them somewhere, whatever the case might be, that you will have it. There might be a few changes in the slides as I go through it from what I gave you guys that night, but they are essentially going to be the same. So looking at the first slide that we're going to cover, it talks about the functions of the lymphatic system. And the lymphatic system, number one, is another vascular system that you guys have in the body. And a lot of people don't realize that they have two systems that are dependent on vessels in order to move material. If we talk about vessels, everybody immediately goes to the circulatory system and they make that association. But when we talk about the lymphatic system is also going to be a network of vessels that are going to move material through the body. So that is the biggest thing, is just introducing that idea that you guys have two systems that use those vessels. Now, with the lymphatic system is going to collect any excess fluid that has built up in the body. Your body is constantly doing work. Cells are constantly doing work, and you are going to have different waste products, fluids, and things like that that are going to be produced, secreted as a result of that work that is being done. Now, in the case of the lymphatic system, it's going to have the responsibility of going around the body and picking up that excess fluid and getting rid of it. So this is fluid that is building up in tissues. It's fluid that is building up outside of the cells, and you don't want that fluid to remain in your body. So it's the job of those lymphatic vessels to go around, collect that excess fluid, and get it inside of those lymphatic vessels. Now, the lymphatic system does not have a functional working unit like the heart to move that fluid through. So once those lymphatic vessels collect that excess fluid from your tissues, there's nothing that is going to move that fluid forward, because you don't have a second heart or anything like that that is going to be responsible for moving that fluid. So the lymphatic system is going to work very closely with your circulatory system. And what happens is typically you will have a blood vessel, and right next to it or very close to it, you will have a lymphatic vessel. And they will run right next to each other, and they will use the process of diffusion to get that fluid from a lymphatic vessel, diffuse it over to the blood vessel. And now we know that at some point that blood is going to get run through your kidneys and will get taken out of your body. So that is how we will eventually clean that fluid from your system. Lymphatic vessels will collect it. They will hold it until they have a chance to move it over into your blood vessels. Blood vessels will circulate that until they get to the kidneys. Kidneys will clean it out, and now that is going to be part of the material that you guys void when you go to the restroom. We talked about pulling that fluid from interstitial spaces, fancy way of saying the material outside of your cells. Moving it to the bloodstream, I talked about. And then the last 2 points that you have on that slide says that it's going to transport fat to the bloodstream, and that it's going to defend the body against disease. Now, one of the things that the lymphatic system will do, and we talk about fat and how it's bad, and people typically are trying to do everything they can do to eliminate fat, but you do have to have a certain amount of fat in the body for it to work properly. And so it's going to be the job of that lymphatic system to help transport some of that fat, get it into the bloodstream so that your body has access to it and can use it for the functions that it needs to be used for. The last one, the body defenses. Your lymphatic system is going to work very closely with your white blood cells in making sure that your body is constantly getting basically patrolled for any foreign substances or materials that have made their way into your body that are not supposed to be there. Because the lymphatic system runs from head to toe, it's just an easy way to monitor what's going on in the body and make sure that if anything has got into your system that's not supposed to be there, that you start the process of eliminating it from your body. Now, one of the reasons that the lymphatic system makes sense to be part of this whole process is because it is collecting that fluid, especially from those places outside of the cells. So if you step on a rusty nail and that, obviously is going to push through the tissue of your foot into that muscle tissue and other places, that lymphatic system is going to be used to help rid the body of any possible infection that might have come into your body through those means. If you look at the second slide, it talks about the exchange of fluid. And the one benefit to doing it in this manner is you get the color. And if you have your textbooks as well, you can take a look at those. I know this image is in your textbook. The green vessels that you guys see there are going to indicate your lymphatic vessels. So those are the vessels that you guys have. They're going to pick up that excess fluid and carry it to your blood vessels. The blue vessels are your veins, the red vessels are your arteries, and then the purple in between the two, those are going to be your capillaries. So you'll notice how the lymphatic vessels run right next to the blood vessels. It makes that process of moving fluid from those lymphatic vessels over into your bloodstream very, very easy just because of how they are networked right next to each other. One thing that you will notice with the lymphatic vessels is that they all have ends. They're dead end vessels. And this is something that is very important in the functioning of your lymphatic system. If you guys were to track a blood cell from your heart and how it flows through the different blood vessels of your body, you would be able to track it from the heart all the way through the body back to the heart, full circle. Lymphatic vessels don't work in that manner. Lymphatic vessels run in one direction and they run from head to toe. So fluid will be collected, and the longer it stays in the lymphatic vessels, the further it migrates from wherever it was picked up down towards the feet. And so eventually what will happen is, the hope is that fluid will move from your lymphatic vessels over into the bloodstream. But if that doesn't happen, if there is a breakdown in the system, if there is something else going wrong with the person, that transition never happens to get that fluid out of the lymph vessels into the bloodstream, now that fluid gets to the end of the road, so to speak. And because they run head to toe, that is going to happen in the lower extremities, the toes, the feet, the ankles, the lower legs. And that fluid will start to build up. And you'll see the limbs, those lower limbs, start to swell up because that fluid has not been eliminated. It gets to the end of that vessel and there's nowhere for it to go at that point in time. So that is why you will see a buildup of lymph fluid happening in those lower extremities first, just because of how it travels head to toe from the body. If that transition between the vessels never happens, that fluid then just builds up at the end of the road, so to speak. The next slide talks about lymphatic vessels, and the lymphatic vessels, I've already kind of touched on this information, some of this information a little bit. One of the things that I didn't talk about is the fact that your lymphatic vessels are going to be made up of 3 different layers. And the reason that I put this out there is because this is now a trend that we are seeing in a lot of different places in the body. In the heart, we had 3 different layers. In the blood vessels, we have 3 different layers. In the uterus, you have 3 different layers. So in a lot of these different structures, you have an inner lining, an outer lining, and then you have the lining in the middle that is typically always muscle. And the design of the lymphatic vessels is the same. So we have an inner lining to that vessel, we have an outer layer, and then in the middle, you have a muscular layer. Now, what happens is because you don't have a heart, you don't have an organ that is pumping or moving that fluid forward in your lymphatic vessels, they will actually do a couple of things. Number one, the muscle layer that you have in the lymphatic vessels does have the ability to contract and relax. So that will help. When they contract, it will help move the fluid forward. The vessels also running right next to your blood vessels are going to have the benefit of those vessels responding to the contraction of the heart. So the blood vessels, as that heart contracts, they will adjust and adapt their size, and that will push up against your lymphatic vessels, which will also help move the fluid forward. And then you have the muscles of the body. So these vessels, whether they're blood vessels or they are lymphatic vessels, are going to be running very close to the muscles of the body. So as you guys are physically active and those muscles are contracting and pushing up against those vessels, that will also help that fluid move forward. So even though the lymphatic vessels do not have their own means of moving the fluid forward through something like I said, the heart, there are other ways that they can keep that fluid moving in a forward direction. The muscle lining that they have in the lymphatic vessels themselves, the change in size and shape, and the beating of the blood vessels next to them, and then the contraction of muscles when you do physical activity, your skeletal muscles. So all of those will be used to keep fluid moving forward in those lymphatic vessels. If you look at the slide that is identified as lymph fluid is something that changes on a daily basis. It is not something that from one person to the next is going to be the same. And from day to day in a person, it is not going to be the same. Lymph fluid is going to vary based on what you put into your body, what you come in contact with. So the foods that you eat will impact it. If you clean and you've been using different cleaners in your house and don't have gloves on, that gets into your skin and things like that, that is going to be part of your lymph fluid. So the composition of lymph fluid is something that changes on a day-to-day basis based on what you've come in contact with and what you have provided your body through the foods that you eat. The next slide that you guys have, or the next slide that you need to look at is the one that says the job of the lymph vessels. And in what I've already kind of provided to you guys, I've covered most of this, but gives you a look at the collection of that fluid, reminds you of the fat that is going to be absorbed and then taken to the bloodstream. Now, the next one that I want you guys to find in your packet is referred to as lymph nodes. Now, when we talk about lymph nodes, these are going to be tiny little structures that you guys have all throughout the body. The average person is going to have somewhere in the neighborhood of 600 to 700 lymph nodes in their body. So from head all the way down to your toes, you will have 600 to 700 lymph nodes that are dispersed throughout your system. Now, I don't know why, but a lot of times if you look at a picture of the lymphatic system, they will show you the lymph nodes, and right about the midsection, they make it look like the lymph nodes stop. You do have lymph nodes all the way down to your toes. So if you are looking at images in the textbook and that's kind of what it indicates to you, please kind of disregard that. You do have lymph nodes, like I said, throughout the entire body. Some of them are randomly dispersed, and then you also have others that are going to be in higher concentrations. And it indicates that the three places where you see lymph nodes in higher concentrations are going to be in the neck, the groin, and in the armpit region. So you go to the doctor and you're not feeling well, one of the first things that they're going to do when they get you into the examination room is they're going to start feeling around on your neck. And what they're looking for is they're looking to see if those lymph nodes that are in your neck are hard, like somebody has taken a rock and put it up underneath your skin. What the lymph nodes will actually do is they will collect any foreign material that is not supposed to be in your body, or anything that has been attacked by your white blood cells, killed, and now you don't want that circulating through your body. So any foreign material that has been basically incapacitated, you are going to store that in those lymph nodes to make sure that your body can completely disable it, can't do any harm to your body, and not allow it to continue to circulate through your system. So by having those lymph nodes from head to toe, it just ensures that once that foreign material has been kind of tracked, killed, whatever the case might be, it's going to be stored there and it doesn't continue to have access to your body. Now, the reason that we have the lymph nodes in the neck, the armpit, and the groin, and we have them in heavy concentration in those three places, is because that's where you have three of the highest risks for foreign invaders to get into your system. In the neck, you have a lot of different openings, and we're hearing a lot about these openings. They're talking about right now, you don't want to touch your face, your mouth, your nose, your eyes. You don't want to come in contact with those when you're out in public, especially right now. And that's because those are all points of entry for foreign invaders to get into your system. You can inhale them, you can get in through your mouth, eyes, things like that. And so because you have all of those places where foreign invaders can come in your neck, you are going to have a very high concentration of lymph nodes. So you have those structures right there to deal with any of those things that are coming into your body through those means. The groin, if you think about the anatomy, this is another place where we have openings to the outside world. So you have places where foreign material can come into the body on both the male and the female body, just through those openings that you guys have. So again, a place where we want to have a high concentration of lymph nodes to make sure that if you do get any invaders coming in through those areas, that you can deal with them right away. And then the armpit. Armpit's a little bit different because obviously we don't have any openings in our armpits, but what you have is a very good breeding ground for bacteria. If you think about the conditions of your armpits, most of us spend most of our time with our arms down, which creates a very warm area. It's dark because we do have our arms down. We usually have clothing over that. And so now we have a warm, dark area. And then on top of that, most of us at some point through the day are going to sweat. And when you combine those three things, a warm, dark, moist environment, you have just created a breeding ground for bacteria. And so in that armpit region, we also have a high collection of lymph nodes just because of that breeding ground, like I said, that we're basically creating through how our body is positioned and designed. The last thing on there that I didn't talk about are the tonsils. We talk about the tonsils, people have had their tonsils removed, and tonsils are the largest lymph nodes that we have in the body. I believe we talked about that when we went through our digestive chapter as well, but they are so much larger than the other lymph nodes we have that they get their own name. The next slide after that talks about the location of lymph nodes and kind of gives you an idea of where those high collections are. So you can see in the cervical area, in the armpit region, and then in the groin, how you have a high collection. Again, this is an image where you get to the legs and it would appear like you have no lymph nodes in your legs. That is not the case. You don't have them in high concentration in the legs, but you do have them from head to toe. Job of the lymph nodes, and I've kind of talked through some of this already. The job of the lymph nodes is basically to work like storage tanks for those foreign invaders, bacteria, viruses, things like that, that you've come in contact with, and your body has now collected them and put them in a place where they are not going to be able to do any damage or harm to your system. So think of your lymph nodes as holding tanks, and that's why they get so hard when you are fighting off an infection, is because you will continue to pack in those bacteria, or you will continue to pack in those viruses into those lymph nodes as your body is disabling them, and they get so hard because they are packed full of all of these things that your body has determined does not belong in your system, and is, like I said, trying to disable them and make sure that they are not continuing to move through your system, potentially invading your cells and causing you to become sick. The next slide that I want you guys to take a look at looks at the thymus gland. The thymus gland is a unique gland that we have in the body because of the fact that this is one particular structure that we have that starts out very large when you're little and actually gets smaller as you age. So it is tucked right behind your breastbone, and it's going to have the responsibility of training what are known as your T cells. Now, T cells start out in your bone marrow, and they will go through the maturation process up to a certain point, and then they will actually leave your bone marrow, travel through your bloodstream, and go up to the thymus. Once they get to the thymus, those T cells are now going to get a second set of training instructions, and it's in the thymus that they are going to learn how to fight off one infection. And these T cells, you have a group of T cells that know how to fight off polio, that know how to fight off the measles, another group that knows how to deal with rubella, chickenpox. But these T cells can only deal with one particular infection. So they are trained specifically on one infection, and that's all they can deal with. And then you have another group of T cells that are trained on a different infection, and that's all they can deal with. And your body just creates this library of all these different groups of T cells that are specifically trained in how to deal with a specific infection. Kind of think of it as being a library. You have a bunch of books in the library, and they are on specific topics. Likewise, your T cells are trained to deal with specific illnesses. In AIDS, autoimmune deficiency syndrome, the reason that we are worried about the T cells is because in AIDS, your body is killing off your own T cells. And so as those T cell numbers are reduced, your ability to fight off different types of infections, even infections you've already come in contact with, is going to be reduced and ultimately eliminated. And that's why people who have HIV and AIDS end up dying from things like pneumonia or other relatively simple or basic illnesses, because their body no longer has that collection of immune cells that know how to fight it off. And that's why they will check that T cell count. And as that T cell count drops, they know that that person is becoming more and more compromised in their ability to fight off different types of infection. Now, we don't keep anything in the human body that does not serve a purpose. And so as we age, we typically stay in the same place. A lot of people might be born and spend their entire life in the same state. Even if we move, we typically are going to move somewhere in the United States. And so after a while, we have come in contact with all of the different illnesses that we are going to see throughout our lifetime. And we don't need that thymus anymore. It doesn't have any more T cells to train because we've already come in contact with everything. So the body, not wanting to take care of something that doesn't serve a purpose, will actually begin to absorb that thymus gland. And if you live long enough, somewhere in your 60s, that thymus gland is going to be completely reabsorbed, and it will be replaced by a pocket of fat. So if you live long enough, you will no longer have a thymus. Now, if in your 20s, 30s, you pick up and move from the United States to Africa, now you're coming in contact with a whole different set of illnesses and infections, and that thymus is probably going to stay with you because now it has a brand new job or task to do in training you for all of these new illnesses that you're coming in contact with. But for the most part, most people will eventually live longer than their thymus, and they will at some point no longer have a thymus in their body. The spleen, if you find the slide that talks about that, the spleen is one of the 3 filters that we have in the body. And the 3 filters that we have are the liver, the kidneys, and the spleen itself. Now, the liver is going to deal with toxic things that come in typically from the outside. So these are things that we are ingesting from sources other than our body. The kidneys are going to clean out those things that are toxic that come from inside of our body. And the spleen is going to clean out those things that are foreign invaders, so things that could cause infection or illness. So we have these three different filters. They are all designed to clean out material from our body. And if you think about where they're located, your liver and spleen are almost straight across from each other. So they're right in the mid portion of the body. The kidneys pretty much on point, but they are going to be more to the backside. And if you think about why that would make sense that you want all of those filters to be located where they are, nothing happens by chance in the human body. The reason that those three filters are all midpoint is because no matter how that waste product, that toxic material, that foreign invader gets into our system, if we have all of those filters at the midpoint, as they are traveling through our body from top down and from our feet up, like I said, no matter how it comes in, it is going to spend the least amount of time in our body before it hits one of those filters and gets cleaned out. Now, the liver, like I said, typically deals with toxins that come in from outside. So somebody drank something, ingested something that they shouldn't. The kidneys are going to deal with things that our body produce, so cellular waste product. Spleen, those foreign invaders that cause infection. But please understand that in cases where the body is kind of losing the battle, that they will help each other out. So while they have their main things that they focus on, in times of need, they will help each other out. The last slide that you guys have there talks about autoimmune diseases. I'm not going to go into great detail with any one of these. What I want you guys to understand about autoimmune diseases, the prefix auto does indicate self. And so an autoimmune disorder or disease is a situation where a person loses the ability to recognize their own body structures. So a cell, a tissue, whatever the case might be, for whatever reason, the body no longer recognizes it as something that you made, and it will start to attack it and kill it and try to get rid of it. You have things like rheumatoid arthritis, where somebody loses the ability to recognize their cartilage tissue, and their body will actually start to attack the cartilage and eliminate it from the body. And so they develop arthritis in their joints. Now, arthritis typically is something that you get from overuse of a particular body part. So it's in a specific location. With rheumatoid arthritis, it will impact any place that you have cartilage. So it is much more widespread than what we typically think of arthritis being. I used the example just a minute ago of HIV and AIDS. That is an autoimmune disease where your body loses the ability to recognize your immune cells, and it will attack your own immune cells and start to get rid of them, which is going to reduce your ability to fight off infections, even infections that you've already had. So that is a list of some of the common autoimmune disorders that are out there. You guys can take a look at those. Like I said, I'm not going to go through each one individually. I just wanted you guys to be able to see some of those autoimmune disorders. All right, so that wraps up our conversation. This is our first conversation. We will actually have another one that talks about our immune system. So this was more the structure side of things. Next time it will be more the actual process of if you do get invaded with something, how your body is going to react and deal with that, which is very fitting for what we are going through right now. As I mentioned earlier, continue with the questions if you have any. Let me know of any concerns or anything like that. And I, again, hope that everyone is doing well and staying safe.